involves 3 layers of production. So you have the raw materials in the form of oil, gas, coal. Then you have one layer of processing called refining. There's another layer of processing called uh, cracking. And then there is the third layer where the base petchem are made, then from which fertilizers, plastics, detergents, and all that is made. So for a process as complex as this, investments are equally complex. And trying to find out who's investing in what part is extremely difficult. If you have to break that down to which is a international investor and which is it a bank or is it a national investor, is to get those breakdowns is even more difficult. With databases being behind paywalls, that adds another layer of complexity to even knowing who's investing in what part and then hold them accountable. So it's many layers of the onion that we need to peel out before we can get to who's funding what part at the core, right? So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Next. Yeah. So we look at the trends in the petrochem industry. So right now, we know that there's a focus of moving to electric vehicles. So the need for oil as fuel is coming down. Yet we see a continued focus on extraction of oil and oil coming into India. That's because petrochem products, in terms of its market, has succeeded. Right now, it's growing at a 3% compounded annual growth rate. And there's a stagnating demand of fuel. So all this fuel is getting diverted to petrochem. It is believed, forecasts say that the future of oil, 1/3 of that will be used for petrochem and 2/3 for everything else. So that's how critical oil is for the petrochem industry. Ashish. So where are we on petrochem today? Right, so we are the 6th biggest producer in the world and 4th in Asia. The market size is growing at a 9.3% compound annual growth rate. The total so there's chemicals and petrochemicals, so sometimes it's difficult to separate the two. That's the figure for 4.78% for both put together. The per capita consumption, we'll often hear per capita consumption in India is low. So per capita consumption of petchem in India is 1/10 of what the rest of the world uses, or per capita consumption of plastics is only 13 kgs, while the rest of the world is using maybe 30 kgs, right? So these are then used as excuses for the industry to set up more petrochem installations and to set up more petrochem installations, and for investors to find that lucrative, an investment to make. Yeah, next. So what we see over here is basically that India has a deficit. I mean, we have a demand growth of 8%, compounded annual growth rate, right? But if you look at what we're producing, the demanding capacity, it's those light colored ones. Those gaps, those dotted lines is where is the gap, the potential capacity for petrochem production in India. And what we are seeing now in terms of investment in petrochem is filling up that gap. So we have the West Coast refinery, which is now popularly called RRPCL, which is the Ratnagiri refinery, the big one, or the Reliance and all the expansions that are happening by everyone. The hope is that that gap will be filled up. According to forecasts, it will take 15 international large-scale petrochemical installations for that gap to be filled in. So we can expect 15 such big installations to come to India in the coming future. Like we said, these are some of the reasons quoted. This is slightly old data. So they're saying India is consuming 10 kgs per capita, but of plastic, but actually we're using 13 kgs, which is still nothing compared to the world average. So this is the push where investments in petrochem is coming from. This is the demand that the new installations are going to try and fulfill. So the 3 big drivers for petrochem investment boom that we are seeing now is that the refiners like Reliance and others are expanding capacity. Nayara is expanding capacity. Everyone's expanding capacity. The second is there has been an increase in some domestic players. You've had Opal, you have Deepak, and you have the HPCL, BPCL, all of them that have come up in the petrochem part. So maybe they were in petroleum earlier, but they have forward linked to petrochem. So that is the second driver, because they're doing a refinery integrated petrochem. While they're processing crude oil, they're also getting into the petrochem industry. And finally, international players are very keen to invest. And in this, we will see that it's most Saudi Arabia and Russia. These are the two countries which have largest stakes. And we look at some numbers going forward. Basically, it's the Middle East and Russia which is putting a lot of money into petrochem in India. The characteristics of the Indian petrochem industry is it's oligopolistic. There are about 15 major, maybe petchem players, and that's it. So it's very demand. It's not demand driven. It's commodity driven. So the presence of the commodity will create the demand, right? So it's not that people want more plastic, but because there's more capacity to produce more plastic, there will be a push for more consumption of plastic. So unlike other economics, this is not so much driven by demand, but it's driven by the industries which are producing this plastic. The second important part in this is the refinery integration that we said, because India imports 85% of its oil. So they're importing it at the coast, having refineries there. Petroleum happens, and alongside with that, petrochem happens. So Indian policy also supports this kind of cluster-based development, as we will see further. The last point is of what I would like to draw attention to, which is on tariffs and duty barriers. In the name of anti-dumping, India is also reducing import duties, so that the production in the country can be made more and more lucrative. Yeah, Ashish. What are the trends shaping the industry? So there's a gold rush for petrochem because, like we said, that there's a 3% CAGR world over for petrochem. This oversupply and deficit, India sees a very funny trend. We are exporting some forms of polymers, but we are also importing other forms of polymers. For example, we are importing PVC, which is why the coal to PVC plant by Adani is so pushed by the government. That's because sometimes the quality of the polymer that is being produced is not up to what the industry needs. So we are importing some things, we're exporting some things, and the government sees this as a leakage of money. The government wants that India produces everything and exports everything. So that's also a major trend that is shaping the industry going forward. And and the final one, the sixth one, especially the dynamic regulatory environment for trade, is that the industry believes that the government will tailor make environmental regulation as per their need. And there's a belief that they won't have to be very stringent in their norms of production, and that will give them a fillip to continue producing. So that's the important part. So there is a standing committee on chemicals and fertilizers which met in March 2021 and came up with a report. And these are some of the key observations. There's a gap between demand and supply. Basically, they want to supply more and create more demand. The second is that, and the final one I would again draw attention to, that very clearly the government and the standing committee said that they want India to be an exporter of petrochem. So what it'll do is it'll import oil, it'll produce these extremely hazardous toxic poison, and then it'll send it off. But who'll earn from that, selling it off into the other countries, is obviously these big 15, or so players. So who pays the cost of, TB, cancer, loss of crop, loss of fish, DNA changes in our own bodies, is the people, but coffers of the private companies will be getting filled up. And next. Investment in the petchem industry. Right now, there is a 16.4 billion current investment. Next one. There's a planned investment of 107.5 billion US dollars is being planned. So you can see where we are headed. Next. State supports with infrastructure, national infrastructure pipeline, to policies like the PCPR policy, which supports this kind of cluster-based approach, where viability gap funding of at least 20%, if not more. Next. These are the 4 PCPIRs that are being planned. These are petrochem parks or investment regions, actually. You can see what the numbers are looking like. Next. This is the foreign direct investment in equity that is coming into the sector. 2018, we see a massive peak. Comes down after that, maybe because of COVID, but is climbing again. We're seeing already April to December 21, 22 is already rising. Ashish, these are the big investors. These are the private companies who are trying to find opportunities for joint ventures and coming to India. Some of them already exist, others are trying to find their way in. Ashish? Some examples: Saudi Aramco and Abu Dhabi National Oil Company heavily invested in RRPCL. SABIC has a technology and innovation center in Bangalore. Basically, it is to see how you can make more and more forever chemicals. Russia's Rosneft has a 49% stake in IRA Energy when it bought off SR. Reliance has also gotten into a joint venture with Sibur, which is a subsidiary of Saudi Aramco, for rubber production in Jamnagar. And we are seeing that Russia is investing in massive pipelines in India. Gas is finding a big place in India. Yeah, Ashish. ADB investments, it's important to note that the amount of ADB and World Bank investments are not very high. But what the investing is in a very core part. Unless you are able to bring in the gas and the petrol from the coast, from the ship onto your land, you can do nothing with it. And that's what they're funding. They're funding LNG terminals and they're funding pipelines. Right. So these are the two. And also there is one Visakhapatnam Chennai Industrial Corridor, which also will have a PCPIR, and ADB has offered to invest in that project as well. Yeah, next. World Bank investment. So we World Bank you won't find World Bank mentioning petrochem too much today, but it's their blessing that petrochem exists the way it does in this country today. They funded the first big petrochem project in India in 1985. And went on to invest in the second big project, which was IPCL, which finally was bought over by Reliance, which is in Dahej. And it was the second biggest investment in petchem. So our legacy for petchem, we owe to the World Bank. Yeah, now these are just some photos. This is just Dahej. That's the mall, as we call it in our team. We call it the petchem mall, toxicity mall. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'll read this. I'm sure the slides will come. Next. This is the green belt, which is basically shrubs that have been grown on the divider of the road, which is being passed off as green belt. It's covered with black soot because of the coal that's getting transported. So that even that is not green, but it's called green belt. This is Adani's coal plant up. This is the coast where you can see there's effluents going directly into the sea. Yeah, Ashish. Some more of that where effluents are going right into the sea. Yeah. These are not the sea. These are water channels where Opal, which is the anchor tenant in Dahej, is dumping waste. Cows have died in this water, having had drunk this water, and the one that we saw in the previous slide. Cows drink this water and then they die. Yeah. Adani only repairs loos and homes and puts their name on it. Yeah, this is Aditya Birla on the right. A toilet repaired. It's a repaired toilet, by the way, and that's a repaired home, and that's Adani on it. These are only repaired. These were part of government housing. This is not funded by. They would have put one chat, and then there is the Adani name over there.